In today's video, I'm going to be rating custom Yu-Gi-Oh cards submitted by you guys. So we all did this as kids. If you played Yu-Gi-Oh, you made your own custom card. Most of the time they're really stupidly OP and powerful and definitely could not be okay to actually exist, but who knows, maybe people can actually make some stuff that's fun and fair and balanced. I'm sure that's exactly what we're going to be reading today. So I asked you guys to submit these over in the Team APS Discord server. Link in the description if you want to join, by the way, if you haven't already. The theme this time is going to be staple cards. So that's to say spells, traps, or monsters that you could use in a variety of strategies. First card, Pot of Illusions, because you have to start with a pot card, right? Normal spell, and it says shuffle any number of cards from your hand into the deck, then draw cards equal to the number of cards you shuffled into the deck plus 1. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot draw any cards by card effects. So my first thought is that this card actually reminds me a lot of Magical Mallet or Reload, which are older existing cards that largely do the same thing. The difference here though is that you draw the same amount of cards that you shuffled in plus 1. So with Reload and Magical Mallet, there were always a -1 in card economy, which is not really great. But here you are getting the same amount of cards. It's also not a +1 like something like Pot of Desires or Pot of Extravagance would be, or of course Pot of Greed. So I think that it kind of balances out pretty well in that way. This really is a straight up raw mulligan card. And then for the rest of the turn after it resolves, you can't draw any cards by card effects. There's actually another drawback that they've been adding to a lot of cards these days, like Pot of Extravagance, so it kind of checks out. You could use this to put brick cards back into your deck. So if you think of, say, like, you know, using Red Eyes Fusion and you like draw Dark Magician and Red Eyes, you could like put them on the bottom of your deck, and so that could be really helpful. All in all, I gotta say, this card would probably be pretty good. I mean, I think it's usable. I don't think it's OP. The reason why is because it's not really a plus, so in that way you can't really like, you know, just play and profit, but it does function as a mulligan and everybody appreciates that. The fact that it locks you out from drawing for the rest of the turn means it's not going to be something that you can abuse in like some Royal Magical Library, Deep Draw, Exodia Turbo type of deck. I would say maybe it would be interesting to see like if you could put the cards from your hand on the bottom of the deck and then you draw from the top, so that way you're guaranteed not to draw the cards that you put back in, just to kind of slightly mitigate that risk. All in all, I'm going to give it a thumbs up, 8 out of 10. I think people would play it. I don't think it would be super OP. Pretty cool. A quick word from the sponsor of today's video.
With hundreds of artifacts to equip and over 600 champions blessed with unique skills, you can build your team, develop your champions, and raid your way. My favorite part about Raid is spin for new champions. You never really lose when you spin, since new champions that you don't need can power up the champions that you already have. And there's a ton happening in Raid this month. Raid's running a huge series of Summer Splash events for the whole month, where you can get your hands on some incredible skins for everyone's favorite dwarf, Troon the Guilt Mallet. Raid's currently running a special Deliana Chase event where you can get your hands on the amazing Deliana, a brand new legendary champion from the High Elves faction. All you have to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and July 28th, and you'll get Deliana for free. Deliana is one of the strongest support champions in the entire game and can help carry your team past many of Raid's toughest challenges. Once you're in game, you enter the promo code MyDeliana to get your hands on everything. That's 50 experience brews that you can use to max level your Deliana and a ton of silver. Remember, this promo code and the bonuses are only available to new players only. This is the best time to get started in Raid, and if you click my link or scan the QR code, you'll get these unique bonuses worth $30. We're talking a free epic champion, Tyrell, 200,000 silver, 1 energy refill, and 1 experience boost, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon even more awesome champions. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video.
Board Cramming. So this is a continuous spell. Artwork is interesting. I feel like I recognize that from somewhere. When this card is activated, declare a card type, monster, spell, or trap. As long as this card remains on the field, each player cannot have more than 3 face-up cards of the chosen type. During each of your standby phases, activate one of these effects. Either banish exactly 5 cards from the top of your deck face down, or banish this card. Okay, so this is an interesting one. It's basically sort of meant to be a floodgate, at least that's how I'm reading it. So like you could call monsters, and now neither player can not have more than 3 face-up monsters in the field. And I think that that's kind of an interesting concept for a floodgate. It doesn't seem as overtly broken as something like, let's say, Kaiser Coliseum, right? Or Vanity's Emptiness or something like that, where it just completely prevents your opponent from summoning at all. You could also use it on spells and traps, so I guess in theory, if there's a deck that uses a lot of face-up continuous spells, maybe I think of like certain pendulum strategies, things that use like field spells and things like that. Maybe that could be like a decent counterplay against them, Sky Strikers perhaps. I don't know that many decks have like more than 3 spells in the field at a time, or traps for sure. but like some do, so, you know. Now it's got this maintenance cost. This reminds me of Golden Castle of Stromberg, where it makes you banish 10 in the standby phase. I think banishing 5 is like fair. I've actually said for a while now that I think that more Floodgate cards should have these really heavy maintenance costs. I think that this is actually a pretty balanced card. I'm actually worried it wouldn't get much play just because there are other Floodgates that kind of do its job better. Like Summon Limit comes to mind, or of course like there can be only one. Those just seem like that type of thing kind of prevents your opponent from playing much better than this would. I fear that people would be able to out this a little bit too easily with just something like Nightmare Phoenix. I feel bad saying that like this card's bad, because I don't think it's bad. I just think that it's perhaps a little too balanced and as a result might not see much play. If I had to fix it, I would say it could just limit the amount of cards more to like 2 instead of 3, but then that just starts to end up in that like really nasty territory of Floodgates that people just don't really like. So yeah, interesting concept. I just think it's a little outshined by their Floodgates. We'll give it 6 out of 10. Okay, so next we've got our first hand trap. This card is Delinquent Werewolf. It's an Earth Beast tuner with 0 attack, 200 defense, level 2. During either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent resolves an effect that is activated in response to the activation of your card or effect, immediately draw 1 card. You can only use 1 Delinquent Werewolf per turn. Okay, so this is a bit to unpack, but this card seems more or less inspired by Maxi or maybe even something like Shared Ride. I think this is actually a pretty interesting concept. I don't know that this is the most like immediately useful hand trap, at least initially I don't think of it that way. So it's a bit complex, and honestly I'm not so sure that people would necessarily see this as like supremely useful. It still means your opponent can kind of like stop your plays. But I guess getting to draw is like a way that you could extend your plays past the fact that they got negated, if that like makes any sense. It's got some other useful qualities like being a level 2 beast tuner, so there's obviously a lot of synergy with something like maybe Tri-Brigade that comes to mind. Being a tuner means that like Halka Fibrax could summon it. I think that otherwise you might want to go for more directly useful hand traps like, you know, just Ash Blossom, Effect Veiler, Nibiru, something like that. It kind of feels novel, but it's still like based off of an existing hand trap in a more balanced way. I feel like it might be a little too niche-y to use, but 7 out of 10. Okay, next we've got a Solemn Trap card. So I knew this would have to show up here. This is Solemn Smite, and it's a counter trap, of course. When an opponent's spell or trap is activated, negate the activation, and if you do, you cannot set spell or trap cards until the end of your next turn, except counter trap cards. If your life points are 8,000 or higher, you can activate this card from your hand by paying 2,000 life points. This is an interesting one. It's a solemn card, you know, it does its negating things. That's pretty par for the course. It can only negate spells and traps, so it can't negate monster effects. That alone already docks a few points just because like monster effects are so prevalent in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Now, this kind of reminds me of Red Reboot because you can activate it from your hand by paying 2,000 life points. Mixed thoughts on this as well. If you're going second, this type of card could be extremely useful. And then it kind of, I think, better contextualizes the drawback of not being able to set spell or trap cards at the end of your next turn, because if you're going first and I'm going second and I have this card and I use it against your search spell, let's say, then it kind of makes sense that on my next turn I get locked out from something. I can set more counter traps, but I can't just like go playing spells and drawing and searching stuff myself. It's a heavy drawback, but I think the fact that you can activate it from your hand means that like those two things balance out reasonably well. It only really seems helpful on that very first turn though, because if you're playing this in like a counter trap based deck with other Solemn cards and stuff, then your life points are literally only going to be like 8,000 or higher on like your very first turn. After that, like most of those traps are involving paying life points, so this card wouldn't be super helpful. All in all, I think it's a pretty cool card. I would just say that it, again, might be outclassed by existing Solemn cards. Like, I think it'd be used, I just don't think it would be like the most commonly used thing. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Alright, so now I've got a normal trap card called Mystic Chain. When your opponent special summons a monster, you can send one card you control or in your hand to the graveyard. Take control of that monster until the end of the next turn. If you send a card you control to the graveyard, you can negate the effects of one face-up card your opponent controls. You can banish this card from your graveyard and target one monster your opponent controls. If that card leaves the field, special summon it to your side of the field, and if you do, monsters your opponent controls with the same type have their effects negated until the end of the turn. Okay, so this card's got quite a bit going on. It kind of reminds me of something like Fiendish Chain, mixed a little bit with like Crackdown, a little bit with like Breakthrough Skill. So this first effect is pretty cool. I like that taking control of a monster is something that isn't completely free. You do have to send something from your side of the field to the graveyard or from your hand. And if you did send a card from your field, then you also get the added benefit of negating a card that your opponent controls. So against a somewhat established board that your opponent has, this could be pretty useful. Stealing one of their cards and negating another one of their cards. Maybe a way that I would change this is like when an opponent's monster leaves the field, you can activate this effect, banish it from your graveyard, and summon that monster to your side of the field. And if you do, then it does the negation thing. I think that would just make resolving it and activating it, like the targeting and all that, work a little more cleanly, but I think I get what the person's going for. Okay, this card seems really good. I mean, I think like a trap-based deck that just has back row that it sets would love something like this. It's extremely versatile. You can take key monsters, you can negate opponent's stuff. It almost can act as a pseudo floodgate with its second effect. Wouldn't be surprised if in real life that second effect was something that you could only do the turn after this is sent to the graveyard. Because otherwise, this is an extremely this card's like putting in a lot of work. It can like take something, negate stuff, and then in the same turn also like take something else. And so I think, yeah, they'd have to like separate those effects a little bit. But as a card goes, it's really strong. I'd say like it could border on OP, but like maybe not. I'm gonna give it like an 8. All right, next monster is Atlas Knight of Reflection. So this is a level 7 water warrior monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. Cannot be normal summoned or set. Okay. When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control no monsters, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand but banish it when it leaves the field. Once per turn, when a card or effect is activated, quick effect, you can discard one card, negate the activation, and if you do, banish that card. I have a lot of thoughts, actually. This card seems really strong, and I'm actually kind of inclined to say maybe a little too strong. So this first effect that lets it summon itself is really great for if you have to go second. So like when your opponent's playing, you can just summon this from your hand, which is really cool, or if you have to go second, you can summon it then. Even if you top deck it, that could be really useful. And it's going to give you banished when it leaves the field. Being banished when it leaves the field is sort of, I guess, meant to like make it harder to get back, but banished monsters aren't the hardest thing to recover in Yu-Gi-Oh! Not even like a hard once per turn. Like if you have multiples of this card, they can all banish things and like negate stuff or whatever, so that's kind of rude. I think that the idea here was making it so where like when you go second, this can get summoned to the field easily and then halt your opponent's first turn. And that's good, but the problem I have with that is like, once that happens, it's still just going to be on your field in your turn. They can't even swing over it when they're going first. And then on your turn, it's going to also kind of secure your plays with another Omni Negate. And I don't know, just like more Omni Negations. Do we need more? You could always just special summon this thing like from, you know, the graveyard or something, like you pitch it and then just special summon it, or even summon it from the banished zone. And then like multiple ones would be getting effects. It's also really beefy. I kind of am inclined to say this card's a bit OP. It should have to be special summoned by its own effect first. So that way you can't just send it to the grave and then like summon it back for free. I think it obviously needs to have a hard once per turn on like just the effects in general. Maybe make that Omni Negation kind of a once while this card is face up on the field sort of thing. All in all, cool card, art looks great. Would definitely be played, maybe a little too much. 9 out of 10 in terms of strength, but also just like could be nerfed a bit. All right, last card for today is Arcane Defense, a continuous spell card. During either player's main phase, monsters you control on the field cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Also, neither player can target monsters their opponent controls. During your end phase, send the top 3 cards from your deck to the graveyard. Artwork looks incredible. I get what this card is going for. It actually reminds me a lot of an existing field spell, Magical Midfield Breaker, I believe, where basically when it's your turn, your monsters kind of become immune to just a lot of disruption. They can't be targeted by something like Effect Veiler, Forbidden Chalice, or Infinite Impermanence to potentially negate their effects. So that's obviously going to be very helpful for getting your combos through. It only happens in main phase 1, so the monsters are still susceptible to like, you know, being targeted and stuff in the battle phase and in their opponent's main phase and stuff. Of course, your opponent will enjoy the benefits of that during their turn too. So in that way, it's fairly balanced. I kind of like it. I think that this sort of thing could be OP in a combo heavy format. But I also wonder if a combo player would even want to prioritize a card like this over just another useful combo piece. There's also this maintenance effect. I don't know if I'd want it to be like deck to grave. I think maybe banishing the top 3 cards face down. That's kind of an overused balancing maintenance cost, but I just think that like sending stuff to grave in Yu-Gi-Oh! In the modern day is just like way too good. All in all, I think that this card would definitely see some play. It could be like usable. I just don't know if you'd rather play this than just the card that you want to see. I'm gonna give it a 6, but like it really could be a 7. I don't really know which. This one, like I'm on the fence on. So you guys let me know what you think down in the comments. So what did you guys think? Were these cards balanced? Were they fun? Would you play them? Which ones did you like? Which ones did you maybe not? How would you change them to make them more playable? And should we do this again? Because I think it's really fun. All right, that's gonna be it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.